Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Payne Fund, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Dan Malthrop, Chief Executive here at the City Club and also a proud member. And it's my pleasure to welcome Congressman Jim Renacci as part of our ongoing effort to put you in conversation with the people who are shaping the future of our state and the people who hope to lead it, specifically the candidates for governor of the great state of Ohio. In 2018, Ohioans will head to the polls to cast votes in races in all 16 congressional seats, 1 Senate seat, and the offices of governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, and auditor. And in the past 18 months, we have heard from 3 Republican Party candidates and 3 Democratic Party candidates for governor. In addition to Congressman Renacci today, we will hear from Democratic Party candidate Betty Sutton, the former administrator of the St. Lawrence Seaway, in January. But let me tell you about Congressman Jim Renacci. He's a Pennsylvania native, and he moved to Wadsworth, Ohio in 1983, where he founded the LTC Management Services, a company that owned, operated, and managed nursing facilities throughout the region. According to his official biography, throughout his 30-year business career, he owned and operated more than 60 entities, creating more than 1,500 jobs and employing more than 3,000 people. In addition to his work as a business owner, Mr. Renacci has also dedicated much of his life to public service. He spent 5 years as a volunteer firefighter in Wadsworth. He served on the city's Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and also served 2 terms as president of City Council. And then in 2004, he was elected mayor of Wadsworth, Ohio, where he successfully balanced the city's $80 million budget and converted a multi-million-dollar deficit into a surplus without raising taxes. In 2010, partly in response to the financial crisis and the aftermath, Mr. Renacci ran for and was elected to the United States House of Representatives. He is currently serving his 4th term representing the 16th District of Ohio. Currently, he serves on the House Ways and Means Committee and the House Budget Committee. He announced his gubernatorial bid on March 20th. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming Jim Renacci.
Thank you, everybody, and I appreciate being here. I'm not a stander behind the podium. I'm normally walking around, so you're going to see me moving around a little bit. But I do appreciate you being here today. I appreciate you getting to know me a little bit. What I thought I would do is I'd add a little bit about my background. For those of you that don't know me as well, I'll tell you a little bit about why I went to Congress, what I've done in Congress, and then why I'm running for governor, which I think is important. So you heard a little bit about my background. I grew up in a working class family. My mother and father didn't have very much. In fact, my dad lost his job when I was 8 years old, and we had to struggle. My mother was a nurse. Thank goodness she was able to help the family get through that. But I always learned from them the value of a hard day's work, and I also learned that the only way you could succeed in life was by working, doing whatever you could, and again, getting to know and understand that this country can give us anything you want and anything, the opportunities that are available to you if you really work hard and do the right thing. And that's the one value my parents gave me at a very young age. I was the first in my family to go to college. I did not get a scholarship. In fact, I had a student loan. I worked 3 jobs. I made sure that I paid for my own way through college by going the hard way. But it was also the good way as well, because I realized the value of that education, and I made sure I went to every class. I mean, think about that. I went to every class because I was paying for it. I mean, there's a difference when you're paying for something. You make sure you go to those classes. But in the end, I learned a lot about Ohio just because I had family here. Growing up in Western Pennsylvania, when you got out of school, you either went to the coal mines or the steel mills. That was it. You didn't go anywhere else. But Ohio, I always thought, was a land of opportunity. I had family in Newark, Ohio, and I thought this was just one of the greatest states in the world. One of the places that anything you wanted, any dream you had, you could have an opportunity to do. That's the Ohio I knew. And 34 years ago, I moved here and started my first job, started my first business, as many of you heard, which led from 1 business to over 60 businesses. Now, when I got here, I didn't have very much either, a couple $100 in my pocket, and I came in a beat up old car. But what I always realized was anything was possible. Those businesses that I ran were all troubled businesses too. I mean, I was a turnaround guy. So if you look at my history in business, you're going to see that I didn't take over good things. I took over businesses that were in trouble. I took over businesses that had problems. And then I would turn around and turn those businesses around. And I had a success rate, a pretty strong success rate. In fact, I even took over bankrupt companies. I was hired by a trustee in Toledo to run multiple bankruptcy situations. And I'm always proud of all the bankruptcies that I took over. I was able to turn all of them around into a success, except one. And that one we sold. So it actually was a success in the end as well. So that's the business life. But I also believed in giving back. So you hear the story about it, and I was always a big believer in giving back. I didn't become a member of the Planning Commission because I wanted to be a member of the Planning Commission. I was asked by the city mayor. And by the way, that wasn't a paid position. I didn't become a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I didn't become a firefighter because I wanted to. I was asked. These are positions I always believed in giving back to my city. I didn't run for city council because I wanted to be a politician. I ran for city council because I was asked. We had a city that was in trouble. And then I realized after I was on city council that really the only way to effectuate change in the city was to become a mayor. And that position I did run for with one goal in mind. We had a city that was running about $1.5 million of deficits a year annually. I knew that it was financially in trouble, and I realized that if I became mayor, I could change that. So I ran for mayor with the support of the business communities and was able to turn that city around. One term, guess what? After I turned it around and after I turned a deficit to a surplus, what do you think I did? I left. I left because I had already done exactly what I planned on doing. I'd given back to my community over 18 years. Now, people talk about public service in a lot of different ways. That public service is not the kind of public service you get a lot of money for. In fact, if you add up all the years that I served as a firefighter, as a planning commission, as Board of Zoning Appeals, add up all those years, what you'll find is that the total salary that I earned in all those positions equals the total salaries, less than half of the total salaries of the three people I'm running for governor. I mean, that's a whole different type of service. I call that community service. I call that giving back, because this state and this country has been very good to me, but especially Ohio. Ohio was very good to me. How did I get to Washington? Because people say, well, how'd you get to Washington? Did you ever think you were going to be a U.S. congressman? Answer is no. Never thought about it, never dreamed about it, never even considered it. In fact, it was the furthest thing from my mind. I just wanted to end my career with a couple good businesses. One of them was a Chevy dealership. General Motors came to me in 2003, asked me to take over a Chevy dealership, and I said, I'll take it over. And what I said was, I'm going to turn this thing around. Because one of my jobs in high school or in college was working in a General Motors Chevy dealership. So I said, I'm going to turn this thing around. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a brand new location. And I got approval from General Motors. I took the dealership around, turned it around, 53 employees. Life was great. I actually got General Motors to agree to allow me to move the location out on the highway. And my goal was to have one of the largest General Motors Chevy dealerships in the state of Ohio. That all turned a little bit south when the federal government took over General Motors in 2009, and then the federal government decided who stayed and who went. Now think about this. General Motors now has asked me to take over a business. I've done everything they've asked me to do. I've turned it around. Now I have a business I'm ready to build brand new out on the highway. The federal government takes over General Motors, and how did I get picked to lose my business? I still don't understand that answer. Here's what I will tell you. Somebody in Washington sat down and decided, here's who stays, here's who goes. My dealership was one that was taken away from me. I remember calling General Motors and saying, what's going on here? They didn't even want to talk to me because they had no control of it anymore. But here's what I realized. That is one of the darkest days for me in all of my business career, because how can the federal government take something away from you? None of you should ever experience that. Nobody in life should ever experience anything when the federal government takes something away from you. I did. I had the federal government basically take my dealership away from me. And that cost me a couple $1 million, but that wasn't the worst part. It cost 53 people their jobs. 53 people lost their jobs. So when you talk about job losses, that's a horrible situation as well. So what I decided to do, call my congressman, try and get some help. I thought that was the answer. I didn't even know in many cases whether Congress would help or not, but I was told my U.S. congressman could help. I called him up, asked him for help. He said he would help me, came visit me, said, hey, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do whatever I can to help you get that dealership back. I believed him. That was my first problem. My second problem was I trusted him. That was another issue. Because what I found out when the vote came to reinstate my car dealership in July of 2009, he voted against it. And when he did that, I called him and I said, not only did you lie to me, not only can I not trust you, but I'm going to remove you from that office, even if I've got to run against you. And 30 days later, I jumped into the race. And 14 months later, I was now the U.S. Congressman in Ohio's 16th District. That's how I ended up in Washington. I've been there now, finishing up my 7th year, 4 terms. First 2 terms were very tough. In fact, I debated an incumbent congresswoman up here on the stage, my second race, won that one. But I won it because I wanted to change Washington. And after 7 years, here's what I've learned. Because if you look at my business experience, you're always going to realize that I always tried to figure out how to change things, how to take a bad situation and turn it, how to fix things. That was my big business model. That's how I grew my businesses. So after 7 years, here's what I learned about Washington. Washington can only be fixed. Can only be fixed. And remember, you might not agree with it, but someday you will. You're going to look back and say, I think that guy was right. Washington can only be fixed by having strong states with strong governors who say enough's enough. Because here's the problem at Washington. Washington now is spending so much money and nobody can control it. It's too big. Remember, the states gave the federal government limited power. Now they have overwhelming power. They took my car dealership away from them. That's the first place you should start to think, that's not acceptable. But here's now what they're doing. They're spending money that we don't have. And here's how you fix it. You get a bunch of governors to get together, strong governors. First off, you have to have strong states who agree that we have to change the federal government. And here's the 2 things we need to do. And I would have never told you this 6.5 years ago because I probably didn't pay attention as much as I should have in high school during civics classes. And for those that are in high school, pay attention to government classes, pay attention to civics classes. Remember this. You know how you change the Constitution? You have a convention of states. You know how we fix Washington? We have strong governors who support a convention of states that do 2 things. Here's the 2. Number 1, we have to require the federal government to balance their budget. If we don't require the federal government to balance the budget, they will continue to spend and spend and spend. Because you know what the problem with career politicians are, which is mainly the people that stay in Washington? You know what the biggest issue with them is? They worry about the next election, not the next generation. That's the difference between a business person and a career politician. A career politician works about the next generation and how he or she's going to get elected. A career businessman worries about the next generation and how his or her business is going to be around for the next generation. We have to make sure we force them to balance their budget. And number 2, we have to put term limits in. Now, I would have never said that either. Would have never said that 6 years ago. But here's the kind of term limits I believe in. I don't believe in term limits that we have in Ohio. In fact, as governor, I'm going to push to change those too. You can't have term limits where you just jump from seat to seat to seat. Give everybody 15 years, 20 years. I don't care. Let the people decide. Let's say 20 years. If you can't go to Washington and get something done in 20 years, you shouldn't be there any longer anyway. Here's what happens in Washington. Too many times we have people go there at age 25 and they make it a career. They stay there forever. They graduate from college. They go to Washington. They become part of a think tank. They become part of the Washington, the staffer. They grow into staffership. Then they become a staff. Then they become an LD. Then they become whatever. Then they run for Congress. Then they're in Congress for 18, 22, 23 years. Then you know what they become? Speaker of the House. All right, and you might joke, but that's exactly the Paul Ryan story. Paul's a good guy, but Paul has been around since he was 21. That's okay, but that's the problem with Washington. I like Paul. Paul's a friend of mine, but he has been around for a long, long time. And the problem is when you get to Washington, you think like Washington. That's another problem. That's how you fix Washington. So I started to look and say, I got to get out of here. I'm not getting anything accomplished. I got to go back and I got to fix this state that's been so good to me. Then I started looking at Ohio. Started to see some of the same problems. We have people that are running for, especially some of these people that I'm running against have been running for governor since they were 10 years old. They've decided they were going to be governor a long, long time ago. And guess what they did with every one of their votes? Each one of their votes was a protected vote. And again, this is Republicans and Democrats, so everybody's going to, look, I said this all along. The problems are not just one side or the other, they're both sides. What they do is each vote they make is based on the next election, not the next generation. So they make and they move and they make all these votes, and everything is based on how do I get to the next election, how do I get to the next place. So this is what we have in Ohio. And then I started looking at Ohio and saying, wow, we've got some more problems. We've got some serious problems. We're the 8th most left state in the country. Not left politically, left in leaving. Left in leaving. We're the #1 state for college debt. That's a problem. We're the #1 state for opioid overdose and addiction. We're the #1 state for Medicaid dependency from the federal government. I mean, I've got all kind of statistics that I thought I'd put on your tables, but I'll just give you a few more statistics that are kind of interesting. 45th ranked for unemployment, 24th state ranked for job growth, 54th consecutive below nation's job growth, 17th worst state trying to find a job, 17th lowest in median household income, 8th worst state for business climate, 42nd in economic health, #1 in heroin overdose addictions, 2017 state business tax climate, we're 45th by the Tax Foundation. People run around Ohio and think, it's in pretty good shape. Well, let's face it, it's better than it was in the previous administration, but here's what happened in Ohio. We allowed a governor, and again, I supported the first governor, and I believe in all good intentions, Governor Casey did a lot of good things for Ohio. The problem is he started running for president. He started making decisions, what did I tell you about? Not for the next generation of Ohio, but for the next office. He started making a lot of decisions based on the next place he was going, and he forgot about Ohio. And a lot of other people that are running went right behind him and stayed with him because they all thought, hey, I'm going to stick around with him because he might be the next president or whatever. But here's what happened. They left Ohio. They let it go, and that's why statistically we have some really big issues here. This year, we'll have the lowest job growth since 2008. 2008, if we finish the year the way we have. So we have some issues we got to turn around. And we can do that. Ohio can turn around. Ohio can be that state that a young kid came in 34 years ago at the age of 24 with a couple $100 and started his first business. Ohio can be that state. But we have to realize we have some problems. And then when you realize you have some problems, you got to be willing to change them. And you realize you want to change them, you got to be willing to do what's right, even though in some cases you may lose the election to do what's right. You got to be able to make the decisions that are right. We got to be able to change the direction of our state. So I tell everybody, look, there are a lot of good people running for governor, and there's going to be more jumping in. That's the other thing. I think we got 2 more Democrats jumping in. There might be more Republicans jumping in. It's not the easiest job in the world, and we shouldn't elect somebody who wants the job just to have it. We should elect somebody who wants the job to change Ohio in the right direction. So on the Republican side, I have 3 people that I'm running against, and I tell everybody, they're all good people. They're all good people. 72 years in political background, 72 years in total, 72 years. So there's really only 2 decisions. Here's the 2 decisions that you have on the Republican side. If you're happy with the state, maybe there's some people in this room that are happy with the state, but if you are happy with the state, if you're happy with the direction we're going, if you're happy that we've gone from 21st to 37th in job creation, if you're happy that we're the 8th most left state in the country, if you're happy that our children and grandchildren are leaving because there's better opportunities in other states, there's 3 other candidates on the Republican side you should talk to because they've been part of the climate for the last 72 years. They've had every position that you've given them, from Secretary of State to Speaker of the House to Lieutenant Governor to State Senate to Auditor. Name every position. In fact, somebody told me the other day, there's one position they weren't in, Treasurer. Okay, they've been in every other position in the state except Treasurer. And look at where our state's at. So that's your choice. Or take a look at a guy, and that's all I'm asking. Take a look at a guy who most of you know already in Northeast Ohio, and take a look at what he's done. Take a look at what his background and experience are. There's your 2 choices. If you're happy with the direction we're going, then you have 3 other choices, and you should talk to them. But if you really want to change Ohio for the better, I hope that you take a look at my candidacy and what I'm doing, and I can earn your support. Let me tell you a couple things I'm going to do, and then I know we'll open it up for questions. So people always ask me, so Renacci, what are you going to do? Well, it's pretty simple. Number one, we have population leaving, yet we have expenses going up in Ohio, going up every year. First thing I'm going to do in office is freeze our expenses. We're just going to freeze them for 4 years. I've already committed to that. Now people say, why are you going to freeze expenses? Well, guess what? You do that in a real world. You do that in a business world. You do that in your family. You got to freeze expenses when the revenue is going away. And then you got to figure out how to push out some of the bad stuff. Because let's face it, we spend good money, but we also spend bad money. Here's a couple examples. I tell people, and this will ruffle some feathers, I'm sure, but do we really need a full-time state legislature when states that are doing much better than us, like Texas, like North Dakota and South Dakota? You know how long the state legislature meets in Texas? Once for 30 days every 2 years. Think about that. And they can get a lot accomplished. So we can change. We ought to be looking at some of these other states. Let's look at some of these things. Do we need a full-time Secretary of State anymore? Forget about who's in that position. Do we really need a full-time Secretary of State anymore? We used to have one. We used to need one. We had paper ballots. We had a whole bunch of stuff. Let's start looking at what we're spending and trying to figure out how to bring those costs down. We have 863 school districts, yet we have population leaving. Do we need 863 superintendents? I'm not sure if we do. I think we can combine that. Do we need 863 treasurers? Maybe we should combine some of that. There used to be one city that's broken up into 4 cities or one county. Do we still, hey, look, this is how far-reaching I think we need to look. Do we still need 88 counties? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm saying we need to look at it. We need to look at all those things because we need to bring our expenses down. We need to freeze. We need to bring our expenses down. And then we need to decide how we're going to change our revenues. Because today, you might hear that you had tax cuts over the last 7 or 8 years, but you didn't have tax cuts. You had tax shifting. How many people's real estate taxes have gone up 2 times, 3 times, 4 times? Your taxes came down, your real estate taxes went up. That's just a political shift. We've got to change that as well. When it comes to Medicaid, look, I'm the first one. I'm out there. I'm already saying that Medicaid expansion is unsustainable. We have to change that. Can't continue down a path that's unsustainable. The federal government is not going to let us continue on that path. The question I always get is, what are you going to do with the 700,000 people that are on Medicaid expansion? What did we do with them before they were on Medicaid expansion? We have to look, and by the way, here's another better question for you. 19 states didn't expand Medicaid. 19 states didn't expand Medicaid. Yet we're the state with the #1 opioid overdose and addiction. Let's start looking at the states that are doing better than us. I'm not going to be a proud governor. I'm going to be a governor who looks at the other states and figures out what they're doing better than us and bringing some of those ideas over here. Medicaid expansion is unsustainable. We need to make sure we have Medicaid. We need to make sure it continues, but it's got to be for the elderly, the indigent, the children, and the disabled. That's what it's got to be for. That's what Medicaid program was all about. Let's get it back to that. At the same time, let's make sure that if people are on Medicaid, they have work requirements. And let's freeze the enrollment so people just can't get on. Today, businesses have to compete with people that are on welfare and Medicaid. Well, let's figure out a way to get these people back to work. That's the best way. That's the absolute best way. When it comes to our business climate, you heard we have a business climate that's not very good. Well, first off, we got to lower our taxes. We got to look at our tax. You'll hear one of the candidates say, "I'm going to go after this state tax department because they are going after us. They're going after our businesses." Well, there's one person in this race that not only went after the state tax commissioner for overreach, he actually sued. He spent 14 years in the court system, and he won last year in the Supreme Court. That was me. So at least you know you have a guy that's willing to fight, not only talk about it. Look, these people have already been around. That person is the lieutenant governor. If she's got a problem with the tax department, go fix it. She's the lieutenant governor right now. I believe we have an overreaching tax department here in this state. We got to make sure that we're business friendly. That's what I did as a mayor too. That's how I changed the city around. We need to be business friendly. We need to look at some of those issues. Our tax and regulatory climate. We have to be willing to talk about that. We have to be willing to fix that. We have to be willing to look at it. And don't let anybody tell you that we've fixed our tax system, we've fixed our regulatory system, because we just lost 1,100 jobs in Cincinnati from Procter & Gamble moving over to Kentucky. 1,100 jobs are leaving. You know why? Anybody go talk to them? I did. You know what they're telling me the reasons they're leaving? Our tax situation is not good. Our regulatory climate is not good. Our utility climate and our expense on utilities is uncontrollable. And they have right to work over there. So we can't be afraid to talk about it. We can't be afraid to talk about the issues that are causing companies to leave our state. And that's the type of governor I'm going to be. I'm going to look at those issues. I also want to travel around the state. I always said I don't care about the business in LA or the business in Indiana. I don't care about them. I care about the businesses that are here. I want to make sure the businesses here are growing. So one of my first things I'm going to do as governor is make sure that I am talking to the businesses to find out what makes them grow, what would they need to grow. Here's a perfect example, Nationwide Insurance. I met with the chairman of Nationwide Insurance. I was the only one that asked him how many employees, think about this. Nationwide is I think it's the 10th largest business in Ohio. But nobody ever asked him how many employees are here and how many employees are in other parts of the state. Other states. You realize that only 1/3 of the employees at Nationwide are in Ohio and the other 2/3 are out of Ohio? So my first question to him is going to be, as governor, how do I get those 2/3 back? How do I get those employees all back here? Now, some of them can't come back because I realize there's functions, but there's got to be a climate to get them back. Let's start talking about all those businesses. So I want to travel around the state and find out what their issues are, fix those issues, and make sure that we get those businesses back. If I make the business climate so good here, I'm not going to worry about the business in LA or the business in Indiana or whatever. You know why? They're going to want to come here. They're going to want to come here because we're going to have the best business climate. That's what we have to change. When it comes to our education system, here's another thing I want to change. We drive everybody to college. Everybody to college. By the way, a lot of these ideas my opponents now are talking about, good. If nothing else, I'm affecting change, right? That's part of the process. Nobody was talking about our education system. We have an education system that 100% directs everybody to college. That's unacceptable. I was at a high school the other day, 1,300 students in a high school. I asked the superintendent, how many kids are going to Votech? He told me 29. I said, are you proud of that? He said, yes, I am. We're driving all our kids to college. 29 are going to Votech. I said, you know what you're doing? You know why we have you know why we're the number one state for college debt? Because we drive all our kids to college. And some of our children don't want to go to college. You know, there are opportunities to live the American dream without going to college. We got to promote that. There are opportunities to go in the military. There's opportunities to be, you know, a carpenter. You know, I have a friend of mine who's a plumber. You would say, oh, he's a plumber. You know what? He got his plumbing certificate, built his business, sold his business last year, now has a big boat and a big house in Florida. He's lived the American dream and never went to college. You don't have to go to college to live the American dream. But here's what we do to our kids. We tell them in high school that the only way they can be successful is to go to college. That's a real problem. And that rolls into opioid overdose and addiction. Here's the other thing. We're the number one state for opioid overdose and addiction. I have a panel, a group of people that have, that's been great. It's been a learning experience for me. My staff's learned from them too. A bunch of these individuals were addicts who are now clean. We also have family members who lost their children to opioid overdose and addiction, and we have some of the institutions that try and help these individuals. Here's what I learned from the opioid addicts. They told me that they didn't want to go, this is one issue, and it kind of ties into our education system. They didn't want to go to college. And they were told when they were in 9th and 10th grade that you can't be successful, you're going to be worthless. That was the word that one of them used. You're going to be worthless if you don't go to college. So what do? They called it the golden hours. I didn't even know what the golden hours were. Golden hours were from 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And we've got some high school students here who know you go home, your parents are both working, and you know what? If you're unhappy, if you don't like school, you start hanging around with some kids who also don't like school, you start testing drugs, and that golden hour becomes a real problem, because that becomes the first time you start to talk about opioids or you start using opioids, and that's a problem. We have to fix our education system even in the opioid overdose addiction area. Here's a couple other things. I know I'm jumping. When we talk about opioid overdose and addiction, think about this. When I talked to one of the family members whose daughter has overdosed multiple times, you know what he told me what happens? He goes, my daughter As soon as she goes through recovery and as soon as she comes out, who do you think the first person who calls her in the recovery center is? The drug dealer. And they find her no matter where she's at. They found her in Florida. They found her they find her, and then they get her drugs again. We need to be able to put those people in prison for a long time so they're not finding anybody but their prison cell. And that's another thing we need to do on our opioid overdose and addiction problem. The other thing is we need to get communities involved. I mean, these are issues that we need to look at and work on and come together as communities. These are issues we can fix, but it's not about money. It's not about suing drug manufacturers, because if you don't like the drug situation, you say, well, I'm going to sue the drug manufacturer. Well, the next time there's a car accident, you're going to sue the car manufacturer. The next time somebody uses a gun, you're going to sue the gun manufacturer. Those aren't the answers in suing the manufacturers. The answer is really to get to the core of the problem and to talk to the people that have been associated with those problems. So these are the kind of things we can do as governor. The other thing is we do have to help. We have to be able to raise some of these youth, the youth that do have the issues. And that many of you know that I've worked here in the city with this opportunity group, really trying to give kids an opportunity to see things other than what they see when they go home. There's so many opportunities. Again, my parents didn't have a lot, but they did give me that opportunity. And that's what we got to do. We got to give our kids that opportunity to see other things, to realize there's so many opportunities in this great country. We have one of the greatest countries in the world. My 6-7 years in Washington have taught me there is no better country than this country. Doesn't mean we can't improve on it. In the state of Ohio, I'm telling you, there are so many opportunities for improvement. The first thing you have to do is you have to recognize there's a problem. And then the second thing you have to do is work on the solutions. As your governor, that's what I plan on doing. So I thank you for taking the time, and I know we're going to answer some questions of yours.
Today we are enjoying a forum in our Ohio 2018 Meet the Candidates series. It's a conversation with Jim Renacci, U.S. Representative for Ohio's 16th District and a Republican candidate for governor of the state of Ohio. We're about to begin our Q&A with all of you. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, or those of you joining us via our webcast or Facebook Live video. If you'd like to tweet a question, you can tweet it at the City Club, and our staff will work it into the program. Holding our microphone today is Content Coordinator Bliss Davis. May we have our first question, please?
Part of the way to evaluate whether or not you're going to keep your promises is evaluating what you've done. So with regard to the tax reform bill, I'm assuming you voted for it. Do I have that?
Vote for it.
All right.
Yeah.
So disabuse me of the notion that that tax bill is not really helping the middle class, or at best there's marginal value in that from my perspective. And the second is, what are you going to do with DACA should it come up during this Congress?
Well, first off, the tax bill is a process. The tax program is a process. And let's face it, whenever 60% of Americans, the 1% are paying 60% of the tax revenues into the federal government, it's very hard to just fine-tune and get to middle class Americans, although that was the goal. And it continues to be the goal. So in this tax plan, I can tell you that the average middle income family will get between $1,000 and $2,000 tax cut. Now the argument is, well, shame on you because the wealthy are going to get a tax cut too. Well, look, whenever you collapse the brackets, reduce the rates, of course the wealthy are going to get. When the wealthy are paying, when the 1% are paying 60-some% of the taxes, it's hard to collapse the rates and not give them a break. But we left the 39% rate in so that the wealthiest of Americans still pay the same tax rate. But again, when you collapse brackets, you're still going to have the same problem. So the goal will always be to get as much as we can to middle-income America, because we do have to do that. But I don't think anybody, unless you're there and you can try and design a program, believe me, I sat for 2 years trying to just focus in on, and by the way, what's middle income? Oh, that's another question. Somebody asked me the question, what's middle income? I said 0 to 120. And they go, 0 to 120, that's not middle income. Well, in my district, the median income is 60, so 60 times 2 is 120. I thought I was catching it. But everybody has their own definition. Some people say middle income is 50 to 250. Some people, what is the definition? Believe me, we could have a whole debate here on what middle income is, because clearly There are those that don't pay. There are those in the middle. I don't know where that bracket ends. Today, people say middle income is up to $400,000. That's another definition. I don't know what the definition is. I guess it depends on what you're saying middle income is. The goal will always be to try and make sure middle income gets a tax break, and that's the goal. And we have enough of that. So it's kind of funny, because before the tax bill was even dropped, before the House bill was even dropped, the Democratic Party, and by the way, that's the problem with politics, the Democratic Party came out and said, this tax bill doesn't cut taxes on middle income. But if you look, the Washington Post came out and said, for Pinocchio's on you, it does cut middle income. So again, it depends on how you're judging it. The goal, I can tell you, because I did sit in those rooms, was trying to get middle income tax breaks. And in the end, middle income taxpayers will get between $1,000 and $2,000 on average tax break. You will always be able to find one or two people that are outside the spectrum. But I can tell you, the main goal was to get those individuals that tax break. When it comes to DACA, look, that's Congress's job. So when President Obama said, I'm going to write the law, he violated the Constitution. Now, we can argue back and forth whether he did or didn't, but he did. And what he should do is he should have said what President Trump said. Now, you might all disagree with that, but I agree with President Trump. It's your job, Congress. Get it done. You have until March. We'll see what happens. The problem with Congress is it'll probably be March 31st. But the President did exactly what he should have done. You don't violate the Constitution. You do what's necessary. And I do believe it's up to Washington to do it. There are people working on a bill right now trying to get it dropped before the end of the year. We'll see. We'll see if it gets done. Any other questions?
Congressman, as a fellow CPA, I wanted to thank you for bringing common sense, financial sense to government. I do want to say I've worked with many of my clients. They live in high-tax Cuyahoga County. We have property taxes. We have port property taxes, school, city property taxes. We have high income taxes. Many of these clients who make between $50,000 and $150,000 and who itemize, we've done the math, and they will pay more. And the reason is if the state and local tax deduction is taken away. Now, in your committee, I believe you kept, or the Ways and Means, kept the property tax deduction, but the Senate does not. I believe this will hurt Ohio. It will hurt Cuyahoga County taxpayers. Thank you for your work on the Ways and Means Committee. Can you give us some insights on that discussion, whether in the final bill property will be there, and if there's any way to bring back the state and local deduction so that the middle class is not double taxed on taxes they paid for government?
Sure. So the tax, so we have an independent joint tax committee that spoke at the committee. And what was happening was there were those, and there were those on the other side that said, shame on you, you're taking away this tax deduction. And here was my argument, and he confirmed it. Today, 70% of Americans do not itemize, 70%. When you double the standard deduction, you go back to the tape, you'll see he said this, 94% of the people will not itemize. And I kept using this argument, 70% don't itemize today. When you double the standard deduction, 94%, this is joint tax, nonpartisan. In fact, he's a Democrat. And he said 94% will not itemize. So then my next question was, the 6% that do itemize, what percentile of income do they fit in? And he said the top third. So then I looked at my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and I said, so you want to protect the top third? And everything got quiet. Because the problem is 70% of Americans today don't itemize. That doesn't always mean everybody's going to be affected, but I'm just telling you the statistics. Statistics are that 70% of Americans today don't itemize. When you double the standard deduction, 94% don't itemize. You might have some clients that fit in that, but here's the other thing we've done. We've eliminated the AMT. So I was in New York City the other day, and I was getting makeup put on for TV. And the makeup artist said to me, you know what my biggest problem is? We have those state tax deductions, but we don't get any deduction for them anyway because the AMT kicks in. Well, guess what? AMT kicks in for a lot of people. And I said, well, you're going to love this because not only did we double the standard deduction, we eliminated the AMT. So in the end, I think everybody has to look at this and just see where they're at. I'm not sure. I'm a CPA too, and I've done a tremendous amount of tax returns. I'm not sure that anybody can argue with me that the middle income is going to be hurt when 70% aren't itemizing and 94% won't itemize later. There will be some exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions. But I can tell you that's the reason why I supported what I supported.
Yes, please tell me, if elected governor, what would you do to make Ohio a more immigrant-friendly place?
Well, first thing I would tell you is I think the way to make Ohio a more immigrant-friendly place is to make Ohio a more business-friendly place. I mean, I think what we need to do is make sure that businesses are hiring, that employment is growing, there are job opportunities. But when we talk about immigrants, I also want to make sure that we're talking about legal immigrants, because I do think that's the key too. We have to make sure that our state continues to follow the laws. Look, I do believe in the rule of law, and the rule of law states that there's a way to become a legal immigrant, like my grandparents, or there's a way to be an illegal immigrant. I don't support sanctuary cities. I would tell you that right up front. I'm not a believer in sanctuary cities. Why are we violating federal law and allowing sanctuary cities to be? So as governor, I would tell you right up front, I will not support sanctuary cities, and I'll do everything I can to make sure that sanctuary cities do not get any benefit from the state government. It's just unacceptable. We're breaking the law. But I think the best answer for you is we're going to continue to do what's necessary to make this state not only job-friendly, family-friendly. We got to make it job-friendly, family-friendly, and a place where people want to live and grow and retire. If we do that, it's not only going to be good for immigrants, it's going to be good for Ohioans, and I think that's the most important thing.
Welcome home, Jim. Question about tax-exempt financing. I mean, tax-exempt, why did the House bill eliminate pretty much tax-exempt transactions? Like bonds and things like that, historic tax credits, new markets tax credits.
Yeah.
Well, what was the logic behind eliminating that whole stuff?
So it's funny because I was talking about this. I'll tell you the logic behind it. Remember, you're dealing with the Congress, where Cleveland has a lot of historical buildings, but Las Vegas has none. So Las Vegas is saying, why am I subsidizing Cleveland for their new market tax credit when we have none of those buildings? And you can take any other state, especially over the West. Remember, here's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a state, we're still with a country that's, not everybody agrees. I mean, that's the one thing. I always tell you, you want a good dose of reality? Sit in a room with 435 other people and see how far you get. I mean, the good thing is you got to only get 218 to get something done, but that's truly what happened. People started saying, why is the federal government subsidizing this inner city stuff in Cleveland and in Alabama and in New York? That's the question. And a lot of the other states and a lot of the members of Congress are saying, I don't support that. Now, I do, because I represent Ohio, and I tried to fight. I'm still fighting for the new market credits in the Senate, because what happened is I'm a big believer in moving the bill, so I voted for the bill, even though, here's the other thing people don't understand about Washington. I could say no to everything. Then I'd be in the Freedom Caucus in some ways, because the Freedom Caucus votes no to a lot of things. I vote yes to move things, knowing that it's going to come back. So this tax bill, it's not done. Let's face it, we passed a bill, not perfect, but I'm not going to hold it up and say I'm voting no. And I appreciate a lot of the members who did the same thing. Let's vote it out of the House. Let's see what the Senate does. We're all hung up on a lot of the issues I'm hearing. I had 4 phone calls today. It's all about the Senate version. It's not about the House version. You know why? Because the Senate version isn't done yet. Let's even see if it gets done. I'm still concerned that the Senate bill doesn't pass. So we're worried about the House bill. We got to get the Senate bill. Why would I hold up things in the House? Let's move the process forward. Believe me, I always get a final vote. I'm always going to have a final vote. That's the way things should work. So I vote. Believe me, if the new market credits aren't in when it comes back, I'm going to have a concern. If the interest deduction is gone, I'm going to have a concern. I mean, there are some things, there were some things that I drew the line on, and it was interest deduction. I said, the business, look, I would have never been able to grow my own business as a 24-year-old kid without interest. I believe that's a deduction. And we were able to change it so interest deduction is still available on the House side, but the Senate side's eliminated. Well, if that bill comes back, it's going to be a problem for me. So there are some issues But I think the answer is, it's a process. So when people get mad at me, I get people call me, they say, I'm mad as hell at you. What for? Well, there's this bill out there. What bill? Well, so-and-so dropped a bill. Well, who cares? Where's it at? Because here's what happens. As a member of Congress, I could drop a bill tomorrow. It doesn't mean anything. It might not have any co-sponsors, might not go anywhere. Don't get mad at me. Get mad at me when it passes. That's when you get mad at me if I voted on it. But don't get mad because somebody's dropped a bill. That's the process. That's the absolute process. And I'm not mad that look, I voted for the health care bill to move it to. It wasn't perfect, but I knew that the Senate was going to have a shot at it. And look what they did. By the way, I was kind of happy with that one because the Senate's standing over there throwing stones at us saying, oh, look at those House members. They're never going to get a bill passed. Yeah, we did. We passed in the Senate over there. You know what they're saying now? Yeah, we don't like that bill. We don't like our own bill. So health care went nowhere. So now we've passed the bill over to the Senate. We'll see what they do with it. You know, here's an interesting statistic. The House has sent, I think it's 360 or 370 bills over the Senate so far this year. Only 17 have been passed. So think about the process. The process is very frustrating. You can send any bill you want over the Senate, doesn't mean they're going to pass it. So I guess we got to see what we end up with.
Congressman, our country, our nation is being plagued with this epidemic around gun violence. I don't want to talk about our nation, I want to talk about Ohio. Here in Cleveland, gun violence is very different than it is in Holmes County or Waynes County. We've tried to regulate, I'm a council member for the city of Cleveland, this issue locally, but yet preempted by the state. What would you do, recognizing that urban centers are very different, very unique than rural communities in Ohio to deal with this epidemic that's plaguing our country?
Sure. So what you'll hear always from me is I believe everything should go to the closest local level it can get to. Whether it's schools, whether it's education, you know, I believe everything should get to the lowest, which would be the city. When it comes to schools, just get to the school districts. I believe it's important for the people to have their closest opportunity to work with government. Let's face it, being a city council person or a mayor, probably the toughest positions ever. Because you've got to get out of your car in a grocery store, or you got to go and they talk to you about the garbage collection, they talk to you about the snow removal. I still remember the day somebody called the radio station and said, that Renacci, he's the mayor, and I bet you his street's clean. Guess what? My street wasn't cleaned. But that's what they argue. And I got on the radio station and said, no, you can come to my street. It still has 4 feet of snow on it because my street's the last street to get plowed. But it's amazing because when you're a local government, you're closest to the community, and I think that's the most important thing.
We have a question from Twitter. Counties and public transit agencies have been hit hard with the recent changes to the MCO sales tax. Do you support Senator Dolan's amendment to offset those cuts? And if elected governor, what will be your plan to increase the funding for public transit agencies?
So what was the first question? It was about...
Counties and public transit agencies have been hit hard with the recent changes to the MCO sales tax. Do you support Senator Dolan's amendment to offset those cuts?
Yeah, I'm not sure the specifics on that, and again, I don't want to stand up there and act like a politician. I understand everything. Again, those are the kind of issues that I would have to get to know a little better. I've been really dug into the tax bill in Washington over the last couple weeks, but these are issues that I continue to get to know and get to learn. So I don't have an answer for it because I'm not sure of the specifics of it. And by the way, here's the other thing I talk about legislation. Here's one thing I promise you. You might ask me about a piece of legislation and you might think, well, he's not giving me an answer. He shouldn't give you an answer until he reads the legislation. I need to know everything that's in it. I was a business guy. Believe me, I never signed a contract without reading it, understanding it, and knowing everything that was in it after my attorney read it and gave me his opinion as well. I'm a big believer in it's too hard to just say I support something without knowing all the details.
As a practical matter, what can the governor do with regard to the opioid epidemic in Ohio?
Yeah, well, again, remember the governor doesn't legislate. The governor can only have a vision. I think my vision for opioid overdose and addiction is, and I tell everybody there's four pieces to that. Number one, it gets back to the education system. We have to drive. I'm listening to those individuals who are addicts. We got to drive and make sure those individuals have opportunities other than just going to college. They've got to see, and I want to be able to do a whole bunch of things, internships. I mean, there's a business in eastern part of Cuyahoga County that needed welders. So what they did is they went to their local high school. They asked their local high school if there's some individuals who wanted to learn welding. They took those individuals, 10 or 12 of them. Now those individuals are learning welding. What a great thing, because at 3 o'clock, guess where they go? They don't go home and be part of the golden hour. They go to the manufacturer and learn welding. These are the kind of things we need to do. This will give people opportunities. So that's one thing. Number two, I still believe we have to make sure we're enforcing a higher standard against drug dealers. And whether that means we raise the penalty, whatever. These drug dealers are killing our children and grandchildren. They need to be penalized for those type of instances, and we need to make sure we raise that. When it comes to the other real big issue with opioid overdose and addiction is we need to start working, and I'm glad to see the state's already done this, with the amount of opioids that are prescribed. I think we're down to 7 days. In fact, I'm going to be dropping a bill either this week or next week with Mark Meadows to require just 7 days suspense prescriptions of these kind of drugs. But the other thing is we got to start working with our hospitals too. I tell everybody this, and people kind of look at me, but when I was 18, I was in a motorcycle accident, hit a car at 55 mile an hour, put the bike under the car, I hit the car, went over the car, ended up 100 yards down the road. Thank goodness I had a helmet on for any motorcycle riders, because I'm a big believer in having a helmet on. But you know what? I went to high school the next day with a bottle of aspirin. All right? So if you think about it, that wasn't that long ago. I didn't leave a hospital and they say, well, what's your pain? This is another issue, and everybody's had to deal with this if you've been to a hospital. What's your pain level? If you're a 10 pain level, because we reward, again, in the Medicare and Medicaid program for getting you to 0 pain. Well, guess what? You should go home with tolerable pain. And some people, the tolerable pain, to me, I was in pain. But you know what? My mother told me, you're not in pain, you're going back to school. All right? So I went back to school with a bottle of aspirin, and I was able to go to school and function and everything else. We got to change that as well. There are some hospitals, and I'm hoping others follow. I know that MD Anderson in Texas now uses aspirin therapy. They're getting away from opioids. These are the kind of things we need to do. And then the fourth thing we need to do is we really do need to engage our police, our churches, our local, this is a local issue. This isn't about the suburbs anymore, or downtown Cleveland, or downtown Cincinnati. This is about making sure our local community understands the issues as well, and we got to work together as local communities. So those are the 4 things that I think need to be done. Starts with education, and when I say education, it starts by giving children opportunities to see other things starting in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I think that's important, but at the same time, that's only one piece. There's no silver bullet to opioid overdose and addiction. Nope.
So this is another school question, and Dan made me ask this. So it's on the school funding component. And it was good to hear you talk about sustainability and the process. And so so the school foundation for it is neither sustainable nor does it have a good process. And one of the issues is, as you well know, in creating the state budget, is we have a really short window to try to solve all these problems of trying to create a sustained system that is predictable and forward. So I guess I'm asking for what would be your commitment to doing that differently, getting in front of that process so that we're not waiting to the final 6 months in January as the new governor releases his budget, and then reacting to what you believe would be a sustainable school funding formula.
Sure. Well, again, that's the issue I get back to all the time. Too many times politicians wait till the last minute. We got to start looking at long term. And what we got to do is we got to come up with an education funding system that allows every school a basic opportunity to educate our kids at a certain level. And then, and there's my addition, then we got to allow the counties to increase where they want. In other words, That's why I said it gets back to the local areas. If you live in a county where you want to give more to your students, and it goes on the levy because your county wants to do different things, we need a basic level, but then we need to allow the people in the counties to be able to do what's necessary to be able to, if they say, you know what, I want more for my kids and I'm willing to pay more, they should do that. They should have the right to do that.
Quick question. I know many of us love the state of Ohio, and my dad was in the military. We moved around all the places, and we landed up coming back here. And I do agree with you. You know, as I talk to many different people, especially the young kids that are graduating, they're not picking Ohio, and your statistic definitely proves that. What states, in your mind, as you think about how you leverage, you know, some of the depth of your experience, have done a nice job either turning that around? And what would you do and how would you apply some of those learnings here?
Yeah. So again, the states that have done a good job, Indiana, right next door. Because people will tell me, oh, you know what, you're in the Rust Belt, you're never going to fix things. State of Indiana, I think, is the 8th best place to do business in today. So there's a governor over there that's done a lot of good things that has changed the perspective on Indiana. I think we look at Indiana. I think we look at Texas has some good things going on. It doesn't have to be a warm climate state. You know what? We have to be able to have a state that businesses want to come to. Because if you can get a Google or an Amazon or one of these companies to come here. Now I always tell people, you know, we got Amazon, we've got a big Amazon deal that they're looking all over the country to bring Amazon. Do you really think Amazon's going to come to Ohio? And again, as a politician, maybe a politician would tell you, absolutely, Amazon's going to come. As a business guy, Amazon's not coming here. Here's the reason. We don't have a good business climate. We don't have airports that are going international anymore. We've got to build a state where we have a business climate where businesses want to be here, where our airports are full and they've got flights internationally. We're a global economy now. We can't just be saying, well, I'm happy with where Cleveland Airport is, or I'm happy where Akron-Canton Airport is. You just can't be happy with those things. It's all about building a business climate so these businesses want to come. If you had an Amazon, or if you had any of the high techs, many of the youth are going to want to stay here because you know, climate-wise, you know, let's face it, it's just as nice here in the summers as anywhere else. We have 4 seasons. We should be selling what we have here. We've got a state with a lot of assets, but we don't have the business climate where people are staying. Again, Procter & Gamble, one of the oldest companies in Ohio. I leave you with that. Think about it. They're moving 1,100 jobs out of this state. Why? Because we don't have a business climate that supports them staying here. As governor, I promise you, my goal will be to get up every day and try and make a difference so that our children and grandchildren can say, this is the state where not only do I want to grow up and raise a family and have children, but I want to stay here, work, and retire here. That's the type of governor I'll be, because this state is not that far off, and all we got to do is change a few things, and we can make Ohio first again, which, as you know, is my slogan, but not first in some of the things we're in today. So again, I see I'm getting, but thank you all for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Today at the City Club, we have been enjoying a forum in our series, Ohio 2018, Meet the Candidates, a conversation with Jim Renacci, Congressman for Ohio's 16th District and Republican candidate for Governor of Ohio. Our community partner for our forum today is the League of Women Voters. We also welcome guests at a table hosted by Renacci for Ohio First. Additionally, we welcome students from Archbishop Hoban High School and Brecksville Broadview Heights High School. Student participation in City Club forums is provided by many foundations, including the William M. Weiss Foundation. We thank all of you for being here today. That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you, Mr. Renacci, Congressman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Students as well. Our forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Robert Conrad, Cleveland State University, the Chautauqua Institution, the Payne Fund, and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.